Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this is the 10th episode, or you're our 10th guest, Jake, so thank you very much. Our guest this evening is Jake Lovatt. I'll probably leave it for him to introduce himself, but he graduated off our course about 18 months ago, so I think it was July 2019. It's also special this evening because we've got our first international guest tuning in, so I don't want to embarrass anybody, but Robert, glad that you'll be able to join us, and I think all the way from Zimbabwe, so we're going international, so it's a good feeling, really. So same format, we're talking to Jake. Hopefully I think he's got some photos and stuff he's going to share with us. It's just finding out what he does and how he does it. So, Jake, I'm going to hand over straight to you, please. Introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and where you're working, and what your role is within that company.
Yeah, brilliant. So, as Fred mentioned, I'm Jake. I graduated about 18 months ago now. And yeah, since then, I started work fairly soon, pretty much a couple of days after I finished the course, really. So I work as a design engineer at a company called Thorp Precast. If I share my screen with you, I'll get the presentation with a few images I've got to show. Everyone see that?
Yeah. Cool.
Brilliant. So Thorp Precast is the company I currently work for as a design engineer. So the company's fairly big, I'd say around 200-ish employees, based locally to me, so sunny Stoke-on-Trent. The company specialises in precast fabrication and manufacture. So as you can see from a few of the images here, this is basically precast cladding on buildings. This might be canopies, the full outside of a building, obviously. Some things like street furniture and bits and pieces. Fairly large scale units. As you can imagine, you can see there, they're normally around, I'd say 6 meters by 4 meters in size. So most of the things we're making they're fairly large products, and there's a fair few of them, obviously, to clad a full building. But yeah, so for any of you wondering what is precast, because it's sort of just a term that gets thrown around the place. Essentially, the normal walls, as you've seen them built by hand, is a piece of string and someone laying bricks one on top of the other with concrete between them. So the main difference with precast fabrication is that the bricks are pre-laid into a mold. So you can see it's sort of, you're basically applying precision engineering to brickwork or to any sort of concrete precast. So usually as the format goes, is you've got bricks set out on a grid, on a base. They're then set out into the mold. The rebar or steel is dropped in the back and concrete's poured into it to create what is effectively like a perfect wall. And to most people, they'd either think that it had just been built by hand or it was built in a traditional way. But yeah, this is how we basically mass produce sort of large scale projects. So I'll flick through a few of the images, just a few bits and pieces I've taken from today, just to give you an idea of the scale of the sort of thing that's going on. So you can see there, this is the basis of what we make. So you start with a timber mold onto a floor that's got a grid on for all the brickwork, and then the single brick units get laid into the panel. And yeah, concrete's poured on the back, you lift it up, and then you finish products there. So this is a mold of bricks ready to be poured, and this was obviously later on in the afternoon. You can see it's been finished. So if I flick back from that, you'll be able to see sort of the detailing of where the patterns in the window reveals and everything were generated from to make that sort of panel. Next image there just gives you an idea of the scale. So obviously that's a 12.5 ton crane lifting these things. So most of the things that we're building are fairly heavy, and it takes a fair bit to move them around. So we've got big yards out on site with, I don't know, overhead cranes lifting panels around pretty much all day. Another view there, the inside of the factories. Interesting thing about the factories is they tend to be narrow, but very tall. And obviously that's just purely for clearance and lifting these sort of things up, because you've got to be able to pitch them off the ground. You can see there's normally a few cranes in each factory, and then the sort of panels and the different textures you can apply to. I think one of the biggest things is I obviously did a product design degree, and then I've gone in to do precast engineering. A lot of people sort of would ask me what my role is at the company. And I'd sort of say I've almost got two end users. So one is the architect. So the person who's basically designed that building from the ground up. I've got to sort of make their dream come true in a way. The molds that we design have got to be able to get as close to, if not exactly, what the architect desires and wants out of the project. But then I also have the end user, which is the guy on the shop floor who's actually making these panels. So obviously, I've got to make life as easy for him as it possibly can be. And I think that's the biggest role of design. It's sort of, I've got to look at it as if I want to achieve that, but it's also got to be achievable for my other end user. So one of the recent projects we've been doing, just to take you through where design sort of picks up and sort of takes a project. So this is Piccadilly Circus in London. They're basically having an overhaul. I think it's something like 250 million, if not more, for a full sort of recladding of a building that's got you see the TV screens. It's quite a famous building. I've not actually been and seen it myself. I know a lot of people will have probably seen it. And what the project is to develop Rainbow Corner. So that is precast fabrication on the side of that building, where it sort of splits around almost like a shimmer type effect on the corner of the building. And basically we were tasked around 3 or 4 months ago with generating a sample. So that's basically all R&D department stuff. So they send us these images along with the sort of sample that they want to create, and we sort of take it from there. So we get this through, which is sort of a unit drawing of the of what they want us to create, and then it's up to us to make a mold that'll make that work. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the start that this isn't just going to be flat brickwork and someone just pouring it and lifting it up. So the first thing we had to work out was basically how we were going to set all of those curved individual tiles flat. And sort of the first thing we wanted to do then was start to machine negatives of all the tiles and lay those flat into a mold so that the back of those sort of shimmering tiles would be flat, and we could essentially get the effect they wanted through the use of sort of 3D machining. So this, from start to finish, was designed and modeled in SolidWorks, then transferred to Fusion 360, and then machined using HSM Works on our frog mill. So top left, you can see the frog mill machine we have. That's a bit like the router you've got in the workshop, actually, Fredder, in a way. It's got 400 mil of travel on Z, so obviously we can get some fairly big pieces underneath it, and pretty much mill out what we want in 3 axes. So that is every single tile sort of being laid out for that, a negative of that tile being laid out. So you'll notice as well where you've got like lettering inscribed on them. So the idea is that we can make, obviously, the panel work for the architect, but the 1T, 2H, they're all basically coordinates for the bloke on the shop floor who's then got to lay these in a mold and build it. So the idea is if we can make that modular, his job's easier, but we also get the effect we want. So these are the tile units as they come in, basically waiting for us to finish a mold. And then this is where it started from. So you can sort of see the tile, the polystyrene negatives being put into the mold and worked into the coordinates they're supposed to be according to the drawing. Just a few images there to show you. So essentially there's 5 mil spacing between all the tiles, and that just comes off drawings and the rest of it. But yeah, that was the finished product from that. So that was sort of that'd be maybe a week timeline to sort of generate that sort of sample. So it's rapid prototyping of huge sort of models. So that went well.
I think it's even rapid prototyping, Jake.
Yeah, it's fair.
It's a quick turnaround, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quick, yeah. They sort of were coming for a visit in a week's time, so it was a case of we need it now. And that went well. They loved it in the end. So that's a project we're currently working on. So these molds will be going into production soon, and obviously whether we use polystyrene to form them on the frog, we might use something more, durable, but it's the same process we'll follow through.
Yeah. Cool.
We also have other bits and pieces of machinery we're playing with. So this is a 5-axis router for doing normally plywood, but we can put pretty much anything up to 100 mil thick on there. You'll notice that a lot of the molds from the pictures previous are all built using plywood. So the idea that we try and sort of go with here is that if we can make a standard product that we can then scale up depending on what the panel is, that's sort of efficient for us, but also understandable. So everyone on the shop floor knows how to put a standard shutter together because they're the same from job to job. We just change sizes or simple things like that. So it'd be that machine that we're getting that sort of stuff out of. Just an idea of a few of the tools and bits and pieces we've got in it. So that's a 350 mil saw blade that obviously can swing 5 axes. It's pretty scary. I was a bit worried first time I used it, to be honest, but that's the sort of thing we get into. So obviously we can cut any angle we want and pretty much any material with that sort of capability. I promised Freddie that I'd show you some what he called sexy design.
Well,
so
yeah, I think I need to, an explanation here, Jake, and it's nothing
no
personal and nothing against the company.
No problem.
I don't think that Precast are going to work in a kind of a precast or concrete company is at the forefront of people's minds when they think of studying product design.
Yes,
it's always the sexy CAD stuff or
that's
consultancy work. So I said, right, if you had to make Precast sexy and kind of showcase, put some of that in. So thank you.
No, that's it. Yeah. So this is a project we're currently sort of in the running for at the moment. So samples are just currently being drawn up at our place, and we're working out how we're going to actually make something on this scale. So it's a project coming up called the Eternal Wall of Answered Prayer, and it's basically aimed at rivaling the Angel of the North, but in Birmingham. So it's essentially going to be a huge arch, visible from about 6 miles, I think it says. Not far off the M6, so it'll be something visible to everyone. And the idea behind it is that it represents a prayer for everyone. And it has the actual arch itself is supposedly going to be comprised of 1 million bricks, with each brick representing one of these prayers. So if I flick you through a few of the concept images, so obviously it's called a Mobius strip, and that's due to the geometry that's used in the creation of it. So it's basically the same in cross section, no matter where you cut it. Difficult for us because we haven't got a radius to work from, but obviously from a design point of view, I haven't seen much crazier since I've been looking at concepts and prototypes. And yeah, that's pretty much what the next few months could probably look like for us in design at Thorp Precast.
And would that be, is that kind of, are you tendering for that job, or have you been approached?
We're currently sort of pricing.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, that's pretty much my role at the company. I'm sure you'll have some questions because it's a fair bit to go through at that sort of pace.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's brilliant. I'll pause now. I've got some questions, obviously, but I'll pause. Are there any questions from our students? Would you like to know more about something? Well, feel free again to either stop me, put your hand up, or pop it in the chat. But so thank you for that introduction, Jake. I thought it was absolutely brilliant and cracking. And yeah, I remember you telling me that you kind of finished uni one day and started with this company the next day. So
yeah,
I don't know what drew you to this company. What was it about this company that made you think, yeah, I would have fancied trying for that job? And then what was that process like?
To be honest, I saw the application whilst I was still at uni, and saw that basically they're after someone who had a product design degree or an interest in rapid prototyping, all the stuff really that we do every day on the course. So it was just a case of I'll throw my CV in and give that a go, because it sounds like something I'd enjoy. I think originally, I mentioned to you, they thought I living in Wales because I didn't get a reply on it. So as soon as I got back home, I thought I'll give them a ring and sort of pester them a bit, and that was maybe sort of get me the foot in the door to go that bit further. And yeah, once I got down there, it's just been sort of one project after the other since getting there.
And you had an interesting first few weeks, I think. What happened?
So when I first got there, obviously applying for a role as like a research and design assistant type role. So obviously I was expecting to sort of be straight on CAD, straight doing sort of the things I'm used to maybe. And they basically said, we've just had a new water jet turn up from Italy or wherever it was. You're going to be on that. So I was basically put onto a water jet for about, I'd say it was probably a good month, just operating that on my own. Obviously, I'd never seen one before, so it was all a bit new. Cutting bricks to size, doing all things. And I was like wondering, it really did sort of speed me and get me up to speed quickly on what the company's about. But I also think it may have been a bit of a sort of a test to sort of see what I was about and whether I was willing to put the work in to do that, because obviously I might not have been expecting that when I first turned up there.
I think that is true, because I was listening to a podcast the last few weeks, really, and I was talking to the guy that owned Benchmark, doing the furniture with Terence Conran and stuff. And when they got apprenticeships, they kind of, on an afternoon, they just kind of found like, oh, we haven't got like a proper job this afternoon, it's a bit quiet, can you go and clean the vans for us? And it was just to see how they'd apply themselves in cleaning a van, and if they kind of, clean that van to the best of their ability. There was what they call there's the heart of a craftsman in that guy, so probably somebody to hang on to and nurture. And if it was just a slapdash job,
definitely, yeah.
But you mentioned they do the same with, because you've got some draftsmen and stuff in the kind of the design office. They do something similar with those guys, don't they?
So anyone pretty much who starts at the company, sort of from near enough any position, the first thing that they'll normally do is spend a week in production, making the panels you've seen images of, by putting the bricks into the molds, tying fixings, doing all the things that shop floor do day to day. But it's sort of, I think it's really important in sort of getting them to understand like the ethos of the company in terms of everyone sort of chips in and gets involved. But also it's sort of, it reaffirms people at the top that they have got the drive and the willingness to do it. Because you find as well that the management are massively involved with R&D and the design side. They'll happily come and sit with one of us on our machines or on a laptop for nearly all day sometimes, just looking at how we're going through the process.
And how big a market is this? Have you got are there other companies that are your competitors doing the?
Yeah, there definitely is. There definitely is some competition in the UK. There's a few big firms. I think the mass concrete manufacturer is actually a bigger market in sort of Europe and that sort of area. But yeah, we definitely do have competition in the UK.
There's a precast company on Anglesey as well, probably kind of doing the same, kind of bricks and blocks and pathways and drives and all that stuff. So obviously you'd say you're the best company in the UK. What do you think is kind of special or unique about Thorp as compared to the competition?
I think probably is that drive towards targeting projects that aren't possible at other precast firms, or they just don't think are possible, so they wouldn't even go for the contract. So they sort of push the boundaries of what is actually possible with bricks and mortar effectively. I mean, some of the designs and things that we end up producing at first, when you look at them on paper, you think, how are we going to even achieve that? And then after a few months of sort of basically forcing it through the system, you realise, and then you learn a lot from that. And then the next time something comes up similar, it's easy. It almost just comes to you. So I'd say it's that sort of going for things that seem,
and
impossible.
That is driven probably, I'd imagine, from the directors and the management.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Then it filters through and bubbles up through kind of all the staff working, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know, which one of those machines or toys is your favourite, Jake? Because there's a fair bit of kits for you to spend your time on there.
It's probably the routers. I quite like the routers because it's sort of something I first sort of probably had the experience with those at uni. So and obviously you've got a little Roland, and anything you can learn now on that Roland mill you've got at uni, you can basically transfer to near enough any piece of machinery. That's something I learned because I learned on that machine, and then everything I'd learned was maybe it might have been in a different place or whatever was almost still there, even on the big stuff. So I think there's real value in sort of, because you can't do any damage with that. There's a real value in getting into,
That's what I like, because we milled some foam this week, and if it goes bang with some foam and a 3 mil cutter is not too bad. I'm just imagining that 300 diameter saw blade flying into a piece of, I don't know, granite or something. It's going to be a big
it's
bang.
A bit different when you get stuff like that, but I'd definitely say the routers are my favourite.
So software wise, what are you using now?
So a bit of everything really. So my main software package that we use now, if it's for modelling parts for molds, is Fusion 360. We use SolidWorks, and especially SolidWorks is more for when, so that twisting arch, for example, isn't something that I'd do in Fusion because it probably hasn't got the capability to drive something like that, because it's actually more sort of aimed at hobbyist market. But the HSM Works add into it is just as good as pretty much anything you can get. So all the CAM that I do is from HSM Works. The thing that Fusion is good at is it allows me to program for about 5 different machines from the same package. So I've got models for molds in there that are driven, and then I can just throw them at any one of the machines that's free. So that's really the ability it gives you.
And is using that, were they using CAD extensively when you joined, or is that something that you've kind of driven on as well?
No, they were using SolidWorks heavily when I joined. Well, 1 or 2 in the office were, but all the CAM stuff, or 90% of it, was 2D. So they were using like a DXF type softwares you'll have seen them with laser cutters and all the rest of it. Which is all well and good, but none of it's parametric and drivable really. And you don't really get the same feedback or feel for what the machine's doing with a 2D drawing. So I tend to find I quite like to see the 3D visuals, and it's also good because the customers quite like to see it as well, and you can see something properly as a model.
Talking about customers, what's the relationship with kind of architects and stuff? How much, I don't know, how much are they demanding, and how much are you always able to deliver what they want, or is there is there negotiation and
there's a lot? I think there's a lot of negotiation that goes on. I think a lot of it's sort of you can have this even though you want that, but obviously I'd imagine it works both ways. I don't tend to myself, I aren't too involved with that sort of part of the process, but I know there's a lot that goes on even just with something as silly as color samples or all the rest of it for pigmentation and that sort of thing. There's definitely a lot of to and fro at first before the project's finalized.
I'm excited. We've got a question from Daniel. Do you want to ask it yourself, or shall I ask on your behalf, Daniel? I don't mind. Not a good set. No problem. So are there any projects coming up, other projects coming up that you were particularly excited about? So, and how far ahead do you become aware of an upcoming project you're going to be working on?
So obviously there's the one I mentioned, but there's there is other projects coming up. We sort of, the timeline for us, I'd say, is probably around maybe 3 or 4 months ahead, maybe, before something actually sort of happens. We do find we get a lot come in and it's like, oh, we're doing this, and then they'll come in 6 weeks and go, oh, we're not doing that anymore. And we've already maybe done bits and pieces of R&D. So there's a few things, and I'm not sure whether they are carrying on or where they're up to with them, of doing like, they were almost monuments for the Staffordshire area of like, because obviously this actually links back. So it's the potteries in Staffordshire. We aren't linked due to that, but a company that has approached us and wants sort of architectural chimneys and limestone kilns developing, but they want them making so that they look like they've been damaged. So with cracks and splits through them. So we had a bit of a play around with using the water jet to cut fracture lines into bricks, but purposeful fracture lines that were supposed to be there. So I'd say there's plenty of projects that seem to come through and go out the door that get us excited.
And are all the projects big, or is, that's a section of the company and the other section is kind of, not to degrade it, but kind of run-of-the-mill blocks and bricks and all that stuff?
We sort of probably, most of the projects are big. So in terms of sort of scale of building or whatever, because I don't think it's financially viable to use precast unless you're going to do something big. So places like New Bailey and Manchester, most of the projects are aimed down London. So they're basically big developments down London. And they're more the run-of-the-mill stuff. So maybe flat bricked panels that are literally just, they're probably doing one. We've got 8 factories and a 9th one being built, but in those factories, I'd probably say they do about, 10, 15 of those big panels a week.
Wow.
So but then the R&D projects tend to be smaller and sort of much more intricate or sort of, specialized projects, a bit like that arch.
And do you create the bricks themselves, or do you buy the bricks in?
No, the bricks are bought in.
They're bought in, yeah. Okay. Cool. Right,
come
on, people. Any questions?
We find as well, one thing we do. Oh, someone asked a question. Go on.
No, I was just going to ask, what's the kind of testing you do for doing the process, I guess?
As in,
when you're going into like the research and development stuff, and once you've come up with an idea, do you do any testing in terms of making sure that it's something that you can actually take out and put into industry?
We do. So we'll do small scale sample panels, maybe a meter square, to work out, I don't know, it might be the entropy, something as simple as holding a fixing or a brick or anything like that in position. So we might do a test cast just to check, that it's what we expected, or, it works as we thought it would. Obviously, there's also a lot of testing that goes on with fixings and center of gravity on the panels, because the lifters and all that, it's pretty much critical to the design of it. Because you've said effectively, this has got to be lifted up in a crane in the air and attached to a building. So they're just as important, I suppose, as the look and feel of the thing itself.
Yeah, it's the design which nobody really sees after or really appreciates. And also, I think, we were speaking before, how you are designing the molds so it makes the guys on the factory floors job easier and more efficient. I think, the design, the part of the designer is much more than the finished cladding that you see on the building, isn't it?
No, definitely, yeah. So one of the things we'll do is we'll do the first sample panel and sort of get a feeling for what it looked like. But then obviously I like to go and, have a wander and talk to the people who've actually built it and the lads on the floor and say, what was difficult, what was easy, what could have been done better. And over time, we've sort of improved the standard products I was talking about, like the standard shutters and everything else to make it easy. So I tend to sort of think about IKEA furniture when I'm making molds. So it's like everything should be able to go together without instructions.
Yeah. So
all the parts are slotted, everything's pre-drilled, just all them sort of basic things that then when you apply that across sort of company wide, it means that anyone virtually in a factory can pick something up and run with it. Yeah. And that's sort of been something we've been pushing.
Cool. I'm just checking. So I'm kind of interested as well because you're 18 months in and you started straight away. And what was it actually? And you've got a great deal of responsibility. You're kind of manning those machines. I think you've got a team of people around you as well, and you're leading some of those people as well. So that transition from uni to where you are now, I don't know, just talk a bit about that in terms of, was it a big shock? Did it creep up on you slowly? Did you just kind of one day realize, holy moly, this is on me now, this is my responsibility?
Yeah.
So I imagine it's something that, our current audience is just kind of thinking or being apprehensive about.
No,
so...
it was almost sort of, so when I started, it was a bit like, you almost get, I wouldn't say you get your hand held, but you get sort of pointed in the right direction every 5 minutes, because obviously you're trying to make sure you just come out of uni. I didn't really have any experience, so trying to make sure probably you don't hurt yourself, and that you're sort of you're doing things in the right way. And I think I've been lucky. The people who work there sort of, they want the process working in a certain way that's best for the company as a whole. So, but yeah, I'd sort of say it's the first 3 months maybe was sort of, obviously I was on the water jet heavily, then I was back into the offices and sort of slowly building up responsibility. So it might have been like, oh Jake, well, you do this individual part for this mold, and so I'd get all week to do that. Yeah. And then maybe after 3 months it'd be like, right, can you build this entire mold, but will give me, I don't know, 3-4 weeks. And then obviously as it's gone on and on, now it's like, right, we need this and we need next week. So it's sort of, it's crept up, I'd say, a little bit in terms of like what is expected of me, and sort of as my sort of capabilities in manufacturing and designing things, and the more experience I've had with brickwork and all the rest of it's come on. Yeah. But I'd definitely say probably the scariest part was at the very beginning, when I was sort of a bit nervous to give it, because I was giving people on the shop floor things that they were going to manufacture something with. And obviously when you've poured the concrete in and it's set, it's sort of, that's it. If it's wrong, then it's, it's the mold, isn't it, at the end of the day?
So I don't know, you don't have to answer. What's the most costly mistake you've done?
I've not, genuinely haven't really got anything to say about molds. I've broken a fair few tools, which, I don't know, 80, 120 pound a go.
Yeah.
But that's just part of learning, really. I think breaking tools is important, because you're not pushing the machine hard enough if you don't.
Yeah, you've got to find the breaking points and then just push back a bit.
That's it, yeah.
We've got a question from Ed. He's got mic issues tonight, so thank you, Ed. He's asking really about your career progression. So yeah, I don't know if it's something that you've thought about, or do you see yourself?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I started off there as a research and design assistant, and and then after the first year, we have a review every year, and I was basically sort of promoted to research and design engineer. So then it's sort of, I've got sort of my own responsibilities and projects and to manage and to deal with. And then sort of more recently, I'd say within the past maybe 3-4 months, I've started to, so I've got 2 guys who work with me, and I sort of manage and oversee their training and all the rest of that. So I'm sort of slowly sort of seeing bits and pieces of management creep into it. So I'd say it's sort of, I don't think I ever intended on doing management or anything like that, but it's sort of slowly evolved into that sort of, or it slowly is evolving into that sort of role. Yeah. But I still want to be heavily involved with the base sort of core design principle of it and the actual manufacturing, because I quite like getting hands-on. I probably spend, I don't know, 3 hours in the office and 5 hours on the shop floor. So I'm sort of a bit like that. I can be flitting here and there.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, because obviously, Ed's asked about career progressions, and kind of sometimes those progression steps, the higher up that ladder you go, is kind of the further away you go from where you initially started, and probably what drew you to the industry. But also you get those extra responsibilities of managing people where you might not have been kind of trained on that. So you're drawing on what you've seen other people do, or stuff that you've read, and just kind of intuition at the end of the day. And again, that can be hard, and that can be challenge.
Yeah.
Come on, people. Any questions? What would you like to ask Jake? I've only got one question left. My question, my last question was, what wise words, if you were Jake the Sage now, what would you share with our students? Based on what you now know, what would you tell your younger self at uni?
I'd probably say make sure that you do have a go at anything that might be related to, well, really anything to do with design, manufacture, CAD work, software. If anyone gives you an opportunity to do it, just basically just get involved, no matter even if you don't think you like it or you don't think you're capable of it, because you sort of learn so much from an experience that you might think would have been basically useless to you. I mean, since I've been down there, I can drive a forklift now. I never thought I'd bother doing that. So I've done a forklift license, even though I didn't really need to do it, but they were like, do you want to do your forklift license? I think, talking to that water jet, within the first few weeks, they had me on a jigger pick, digging a hole out for putting in like a water removal system. So these sort of experiences, they sort of, more than anything, they sort of give you the confidence that you know what you're doing. You can talk to people about things that might not necessarily be your role, but it all builds to it.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection on your overall mindset as well, which feeds into you as a designer and your kind of goals and stuff. Thank you, Jake. Dewi has just texted. He's apologising. He's had an emergency that he's had to attend to.
No problem.
So right, let's. I've just made it bigger on my screen. Has anybody got a question for Jake? We try and keep these things 45.
Yeah, I've got another question.
Steph.
So you said one of the parts of your job is the end user become the architect, and you're having to make his dreams a reality. But I imagine that there may be some scenarios where you just can't make that dream possible, or it's not feasible. So what are the kind of ways you go about in that process of trying to work with them so you can change their dream in a way, or kind of find another way to make it possible?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think sort of the approach we have at the minute is that the dream's possible, but it's possible at a price. And if they don't want to pay it, then obviously it has to basically get reduced. So yeah, that's sort of how it works. It's almost like we can do it, but it's going to be a process that for us isn't probably efficient. And therefore it's obviously much more costly to actually do what they're after. And then they might go back, refine it, and make it maybe more manufacturable than it originally was. So case of point is sort of things like that arch. We don't really know. We know sort of how we'd like to make it and how it'd work for us, but whether that'll be the goal or the sort of the end product that the architect wants is a different question. So yeah, I'd say it's basically a two-way conversation.
So with like those kind of conceptual renders, you can have some influence on them, I guess.
Yeah,
in a way.
Definitely, yeah. So we might, for a start, we'd probably want to split it up into something that's flat because it's easier to pour, but you've then got to remember that that's actually a spline. So you're talking about a curve and you're going to put flat lines through it. So that straight away might not be the way to go. But yeah, that's the sort of thing. You look at something and you think, how is it possible for us to make it? But obviously then you've got to go and speak to them, relay that in terms of, we want to do this, but it's going to change and look like that. And obviously that's not always what they want and it isn't always positive, but I think that's just what comes with the nature of the work.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I've got Diolch Stefan, thank you. Got another question for you, Jake. So does your interest in design extend outside of your work? Are you a maker outside? Have you got design related hobbies? Yeah. But I know that you're working pretty hard at the moment.
Yeah, I don't really. I actually really wanted to sort of have more time to do that. So I've actually got a little desktop CNC, a desktop router in the garage. But it sort of pains me to say that it hasn't been used for about 3 or 4 months because I just haven't had time to sort of get in and have chance to do it. But yeah, definitely I like watching all different making videos on and getting involved with it myself.
And what would you like to do on your own CNC?
Oh, I've done all sorts of bits and pieces. That's basically just hobby stuff to see what's possible. So I've done like signs for people and just all that sort of thing, really.
Yeah.
It's only 3 axis though, so it lets me down a bit now compared to what we've got at work.
Yeah, because you've got a taste of the kind of the big toys over there, and then
that's it. Yeah,
you're coming back to something, and you're like, oh, I'll just wait. I'll nip in work tomorrow and finish it off on that.
That's kind of how it goes. I mean, work are quite good like that. They have given us basically, they give us a budget for the year to do our own projects.
Oh wow, okay.
To sort of drive our own creative thinking.
Yeah.
So we can use the machinery at work, and basically develop whatever we want. So I don't know if we wanted something building for home or wherever it might be. I've got that license to use the machines in that way.
I feel a collaborative brief coming on, Jake.
Definitely. Yeah, they'd be well up for that. If it was something you wanted to sort of use the machinery for, I could certainly.
We should talk further. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really up for sort of that sort of creative thing. If we can sort of come up with, I don't know, a problem we encounter at the minute that we simply haven't got time to look at. But yeah, definitely.
Cool. Oh, there you go. There's a call to action, people. Think of something that can be precast, and Jake will mock it up for you.
I mean, we just as a quick example, is we get quite a lot of waste. So if we pour a panel, we tend to have a lot of waste products just there, because you're not going to make a mix to the exact spec on the sheet. You're always going to say, let's add 50 litres extra just in case we don't fill it, because you don't want to waste it, because obviously once you've poured it, that's it. Yeah. So that then either gets poured into basically a waste block or goes somewhere else. So things like that, where, you could have a small mould for something that's actually useful to someone there. And there's a lot of things sort of that can be refined, and definitely areas for design to be thrown in there.
Yeah. Oh, we'll have a think. We'll talk again. We might do something in next September, actually. So those, and I know Robert is listening, who's hoping to join us in September. So if you've got an idea of a project, Robert, we might be able to do something. Cool. Right, last call, people, because it's 7:45. Is there any last questions to Jake? Well,
already put Netflix on now.
Yeah, absolutely. We had them. I hope Simon is still cooking, because last week he had his camera on him and he was cooking as he was listening. It's really nice food. So Jake,
you missed it today.
We missed it today. Jake, thank you very much. It's always great. It's always great to catch up with alumni, and always great to catch up with you, because you've always got some exciting projects going on. Thank you for sharing. I thought those pictures at the start was cracking insight into what you're doing. On behalf of everybody, thank you very much. And next time you're in Bangor, come and visit us. I'm going to stop.
No, I definitely will. I'll stop down the workshop.
I'm going to stop recording now, but